the infamous Karen Forner, attorney and owner of Sonoris LLC. Karen, thank you so much for joining us today. We certainly appreciate you and taking time out of your day to present this important topic, which was well received at the Governor Safety Conference as well, and was something that we thought we would want to bring into the summit for our group. Thank you so much, Karen. I'll go ahead and give you the screen. You might be on mute right now. Let's see here.
Oh, yeah.
I'll stop.
Yeah, I am. Can you stop sharing? And then this is the most stressful part for me where I have to share my own screen.
And there you go.
Oh my gosh. Let's see. Slideshow from the beginning. All right. Is it showing?
Yes, looks good, Karen.
I can't believe it. It's a miracle. I'm totally relaxed now. So, hello, everybody. If I haven't met you, my name is Karen Forner. I have been in the labor and industries, safety and workers' comp realm for over 30 years. I'm not going to say how much over 30 years because I'll date myself. And yeah, thank you for asking me to speak today on one of my favorite topics. I find this very interesting. I'm talking about communication across generations and try to talk about and mention how as a safety professional that this is important to you personally and with your teams. A little bit about me. I used to work as a litigation attorney for, I don't know, 30 years or whatever that was, very long time. And just in the last year, I stopped being a litigation attorney to focus on doing consulting through Sonoris. And I do keynote speaking, corporate retreats, which are my favorite, or a lot of big companies might have like a safety day where they bring in speakers. So I coordinate with either HR or safety to maybe do one or two different topics and be part of a team, helping employers invest in their employees with more professional development. I also speak at conferences and, of course, here at the Safety Summit today. Thanks so much. I'm a native Washingtonian, love the state, and that's what I'm doing these days. So I'll just move through that. Start talking about this generations in the workplace. So, you know, what is a generation? It's just a group of people, and we break it up in kind of these clumps of years of when they were born. And so, you know, their current ages, which I can't do math very quickly. So my slides hopefully are fairly accurate of what people's current ages are. And these people who saw the same historical events, the same cultural changes, and it really impacts how we look at the world and what our expectations are. So again, though, this isn't like prescriptive. This isn't, you know, if you're a baby boomer, you absolutely have these values or preferences. So it's what is in general found. You know, my giant takeaway is be curious about yourself and be asking, hey, what generation am I in? What things do I resonate with? What are my values? What's my communication preference? What's maybe different? So know yourself first. And then for people you work with, either you report to, your peers on a team, or even your subordinates, be more curious. Maybe what generation are they born in? Do they have those characteristics and preferences? And when in doubt, ask, right? Don't make assumptions. What happens when you assume? You make an ass out of you and me. So this has been a big learning curve for me to be more curious, not just tell stories about other people and assume that they're true. Have a little more humility and more curiosity. So the generations we're going to talk about are the silent generation. I know there's not too many of those left in the workplace, but most of us have either grandparents or parents in the silent generation. And I think it kind of just wets the wheel to be understanding how with age things change. And then baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, which are often called millennials, and then Gen Z. And so the birth years are up on the screen and the current ages. I won't read those aloud to you. I'm assuming you're all literate. So again, you know, these life events shape who people are and their communication styles. So let's jump into the silent generation. I think I just can't quite give this one up because my parents are in this group and I kind of just love this generation. So they were born in 1925 through 1945. And I just had a little bit of fun looking. I'm a huge sugar craver. I try not to eat sugar, but I just love it a lot. So a lot of times I have what candy were people eating in their respective generations and what kind of toys were they playing with. Maybe if you're a bit older, you recognize these. I do remember when candy bars were 5 cents at Safeway when I grew up. That's how old I am. So for the silent generation, they were impacted by the Great Depression, right? They remember economic scarcity. And before there were a lot of social programs, before food stamps, before maybe even Social Security, before unemployment, maybe even workers' comp. Like if you didn't have a job and making money, your family might not eat, might not have a roof over your head. So they were very impacted by that, whether they lived through it or their parents did and passed on that kind of fear or coping mechanisms from that. And this generation had a lot of war going on, everything from World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Cold War, that kind of that threat, that danger, those kind of things felt like almost ever present. And this generation had very traditional family and marital roles. Like, you go to high school, maybe the women went to work, but usually if they did, it was like teacher, secretary, assistant, get married, have kids. And typically the wife stayed home, raised the kids, the dad went to work. So pretty traditional roles. Almost everybody followed that recipe card. And for them, the big advent of technology was getting a telephone. Like my parents remember getting indoor plumbing. They both used an outhouse till they were 6, 7 years old. And I think they got a telephone when they were maybe 10 or 12 years old. So before then, you either got in your car and drove down the street if you wanted to talk with somebody, or you made a point of talking with them at church or the Eagles Club. But coordinating was tough and you'd send letters. So everything communication was a lot more difficult and a lot more slow. You had to be a lot more patient about back and forth and planning. What shaped this generation, or because of these experiences, they were very hardworking, patient because they had to be, and they were rule followers, very responsible. Like this is how, kind of top down authority. If the boss says this, great. They often were company men. They'd start working at the mill and they'd put in their 30 or 40 years. They did not job hop around, just very loyal to work, duty before pleasure. So it really was the family, my workplace, they would sign up to go to war, very loyal to their country and not so worried about reward. And that might be decades down the road, but you work hard to provide, and very, very thrifty and saved because they knew that threat of not having enough. This generation liked face-to-face conversation because that's kind of what they grew up with. And they were used to talking with each other because they didn't have the technology to make it easy to text or even phone call or email. Tended to be more formal. So this generation call people Mr. and Mrs. unless they say, hey, call me Bob. And respect was very important. So they're not going to want to do business until they see you, look you in the eye, business on a handshake. I kind of just love that. Love that about that generation. Not too many of them left in the workforce, but it's kind of wetting the whistle of what that generation went through and how it shaped how they like to communicate and their values. There's still a lot of baby boomers, though, in the workplace. So they're going to be about 60 to 78 years old. So a lot of people who own companies, top management, owners, so people in charge, baby boomers. They are starting to retire out, but not as quickly as you might think, which we'll get into in a minute. So these are some of the toys and candies that boomers may have grown up eating and playing with. Legos were huge. I still think Legos are amazing. Love them. So what impacted baby boomers? So they grew up with this threat of communism, right? The Soviet Union, the evil empire. Um, but boomers, unlike the generation ahead of them, did not defer to authority. Like, these are the rules. If the doctor says it, if this is how society is set up, we got to operate under those guidelines. Baby boomers challenged everything. They're like, we can go to the moon. The civil rights movement, women's right, racial justice, hippies, we're dropping out of that. We're not going to wear the suit. We're not going to conform. They were rebellious in many ways and were breaking the rules and willing to do their own thing for themselves, not just conforming to whatever systems are in place. And this generation, the big technology was television. Prior generations got their news from a daily newspaper that you would read whatever your local paper thought was important enough to share. But with television, you're getting national news. And I think for me, I think that the civil rights movement is tied to TVs being in the house. Because maybe you live in Seattle or North Dakota, but on the national news, they're showing like, wow, this is some racial violence that's going on in Mississippi or Louisiana, perhaps. Kind of shocks the conscience. One, a newspaper might not report it, and there's something really different about reading about something, and a picture tells 1,000 words and actually seeing it. So much more information sharing with television. What did this, some of these events, how did this shape baby boomers? They are eternally youthful. So I think the older generation, people just kind of aged with aging, and they might have had gray hair by the time they're 50. And boomers want to stay young forever. They're like optimistic and energetic. They like being involved. They're competitive, and they question everything. The prior generation, much more conforming. Boomers, hey, what about this? What about that? And they care about themselves more. It's not just, the company or the military or the country. They want to know things are good for them and their own personal growth. And they care more about equal rights and opportunities. So as far as management style, they're not going to be just blindly loyal to their employer. They care about their own careers. And they want companies to invest in them and know that they have a future. They do respect that there is a hierarchy, but they want to feel like they are valued and they are important in that hierarchy. And this generation loves to talk. So they're going to like in person, talk on the phone, Teams or Zoom. They like that talking style. They tend to tell a lot of stories. That which I know drives some of the Gen X people absolutely bonkers. But that's some of their communication styles. So Gen X, these are people born 1965 to 1980, which makes them about 44 to 59 now. They might have grown up playing Pong. I am barely Gen X. And I remember we didn't have Pong. Our family couldn't afford that, but my friend had Pong. And you hook it up to your TV and these little paddles go up and down. This little blip bounces back and forth. Talk about generation one video game. I remember when we used to be able to, I think it was Blockbuster, you would check out or rent a VHS player so you could watch movies. It was super expensive, but you'd get like 20 friends together. Because before that, you either went to the movie theater or you waited until something was playing on TV on the 3 or 4 stations that we got on TV. So this concept that we could watch a movie in our home kind of on demand was a really big deal. So that's my sharing as Gen X about this, the technology. And then Battleship was big, Pop Rocks, maybe you remember some of those. For Gen X, they often were latchkey kids. So the baby boomers, like the women, were pouring back into the workplace. But we didn't really have flex time. We didn't have part-time. We didn't have Boys and Girls Club, before care, after care. Like none of those systems supporting 2 working parents, very few of those were in place yet. So a lot of times the moms just went to work and the kids had to take care of themselves after school. So they were called latchkey kids. Either they wore their house key around their neck or it was slid under the front doormat. And they were on their own to take care of themselves from when they got home from school to when the parents got home. Also, divorce, as women were more economically self-sufficient and the boomers were more what's in it for me and I want to be happy. And there just was less like, well, we're going to stay married no matter what. For the kids, that was not as big of an experience as Gen X was growing up. So there was kind of an explosion of single parents. So these kids, it was kind of Hunger Games. Like you're kind of on your own. The parents are dealing with their own stuff, kind of raise yourself. Um, they also saw their parents like working super hard at work and, committing to the company. But then when there's corporate downsizing, they also saw everyone lost their job. There was no loyalty from the company back. They're worried about shareholder value and profits. And so they became a lot more cynical. Like, why kill yourself slaving away for the man or the company when that loyalty is not going to come back? So they had a lot more cynicism about work and employers than perhaps the generations ahead of them. The AIDS crisis was going on. And this generation, PC started. I was just on the cutting edge because I'm a very old Gen X. I took a manual typewriter to college, but then we had these huge mainframes about the size of this room where you could edit like one line at a time. But that kind of efficiency and communication, then the very beginning of the internet. So this kind of information and communication speeding up was huge for Gen X. So what are some of the characteristics and values that often are found in Gen X? They are cynical. So, the boomers, so optimistic, anything is possible, all that. There's one person who I think is not muted, and I'm hearing some background noise. So if everyone can check that they're muted, that would be great, if you would, please. Thanks so much. Or if Brett, if you and Brian have the ability to do that, that would be super. Gen X is also flexible, kind of because they had to be. They didn't have as much family structure. It was kind of this free range parenting, which in one way was a lot of fun. We just ran in packs in the neighborhoods until your parents said, it's getting dark out, come home for dinner. And we're independent because we had to be, and resourceful because we had to be. And pretty technically savvy because we're just on that front edge of needing to learn about it. My guess is people more in the middle or later generation X are better at it than me. I figured it out, but it's a struggle, but I get there. They value dependability because sometimes they didn't have it. They expect a lot from jobs and they're not necessarily loyal. So, that silent generation, they might work for the same company for 30 years. In fact, that's very common. Boomers, maybe 2 or 3 different employers over the course of their 30, 40-year working life. Gen X, hey, if this job's working for me, they're investing in me. I like my job. I like what I'm making. Great. But if not, peace out. I will go shop for another job. And they don't give it, in general, too much thought. So if you're not investing and talking with Gen X that they're valued, you want them to be successful, you care that they're there, be talking about, do you like your job? Is there anything else we can do? They're not going to necessarily be loyal. So you can't just presume that they'll stay if you're not talking with them about, do you want to stay? What can we do so you want to keep working here? They want to know that their personal growth is important to the company and it's important to them. And this is the generation who pushed for work-life balance. They're the ones who pushed for, we want casual Fridays, which then became business casual all the time. And then COVID hit, and now it seems like pajama wear is acceptable at Costco, Target, and many workplaces. But Gen X is the one who pushed back against, the formal and some of the expectations in the workplace. And they're not keen on working 50, 60 hours a week. They saw their parents, kill themselves, and what thanks did they get? So there's a lot more pushback of wanting work-life balance. They're very task-oriented. So they want to be, tell me what to do, send it in an email, a brief conversation if need be, and then let me go take care of it. Just tend to be more independent. They're not as keen about let's work as a team and work as a group. Please don't tell me 18 stories. I will want to shoot myself, is the feedback I often get from Gen X. So they want direct communication and then leave me alone to go do it. Then there's Generation Y, the millennials. They're born 1981 to 1996, about 28 to 43. As I worked with employers on employment law, workplace culture, team building, this was a generation that often caused frustration for older management. But I think hopefully this will be helpful if you're not Gen Y, and especially if you're older, to understand how they got to where they're at and some ideas on how to communicate and get the best out of millennials. I think they were of the Furby and the DS and the iPod generation. Those are some of the toys. I don't really have candy in there. I'll have to find out what kind of candy millennials had growing up. So this generation, kind of post-civil rights movement of the boomers, they expect diversity. If they go into a workplace that doesn't have it, for most of them, it's going to kind of feel weird and be suspect. This generation really cares about the environment. I do think their complaint that the older generations kind of reamed the environment and left it for them to clean up. There's probably some validity to it. So they tend to have, if you have any conservation or recycling efforts and an emphasis on being good environmental stewards, that tends to go a long way with millennials. And they grew up with technology and computers. They expect it. If you give them a 3-ring binder to read, they're going to wonder what the heck is going on. That just doesn't even make sense to them. They grew up with social media and video games. And so much information was on the internet that they kind of looked to that as an authority as opposed to supervisors, parents, teachers. It kind of became the authority on things. And that's different than what prior generations experienced. So their access to information, they expect things to happen very quickly, be catered to, because the internet has the ability to do that. So things quickly. This was also their parents maybe didn't get kind of the encouragement and validation that they had hoped being raised, especially by the silent generation and even some of the boomers. So millennials had parents who wanted them to have good self-esteem, and in some cases, perhaps overcorrected. So this was the everybody gets a trophy generation. You get a gold star and clapping just for maybe doing the bare minimum. But they were used to a lot of positive feedback, not necessarily correlated to performance, effort, or success. And a lot of parents treated them like equal adults. So they called other, adults by their first name, expected to have equal voice, equal standing. And so if your workplace has a little bit more hierarchy or structure, that may need to be explained clearly to this generation of, this is what punctuality looks like. You don't you don't have the right to walk into the CEO's office if you don't like something. Our chain of command is you would need to talk with your supervisor first or talk to the safety officer first. So don't just assume that they understand business or corporate hierarchy. Explain the systems, the why, the expectations on that, because that may not have been their experience growing up. So it's not necessarily their fault. It's just you might need to explain those types of systems and hierarchies. So for millennials, they are collaborative. They again expect diversity. They're very globally connected because they could be with gaming and the internet. They're used to things happening very quickly for them, so they can be impatient. With social media and whatnot, they're good at networking, and they are optimistic. That's something they have in common with baby boomers, right? The generation right ahead of them, the Gen X, kind of cynical. The millennials are optimistic. So if you're a baby boomer, you'll have that in common with millennials, right? Kind of optimistic, things are possible. If you're, people who like to work in teams versus people independently, maybe millennials and baby boomers like to work in a team. The millennials are good at tech, put them on a team and maybe they can handle some technical issues. They do like relationships and efficiency. Again, they're also environmentally conscious. They expect the corner office really quickly, fast recognition. So a frequent feedback is good for millennials. Don't just wait for once a year to, do an evaluation. And I think this is something good that millennials have brought to the workplace. Why wait a year to find out what you're doing well and that you should do more of and you can relax? Oh, I actually do that well. I don't need to stress about that. Why wait a year to find out, oh, your attention to detail or your punctuality is not great? Why not just give that kind of in more informal, real-time feedback? This is good. This needs improvement. So I think that's something good that they've brought. They expect that, and it probably is best practice. You might need to spell out though that you're not going to be a superintendent or a foreman after, 2 years on the job. Be explaining how long things take to move up the ladder. Explain it. Don't assume they just will know what that is, to set reasonable expectations. They do want really transparent leadership, and like the generation before them, they want work-life balance. They're not going to be keen on 50, 60, 70-hour weeks. They like a more relaxed environment, just like the generation before them, and they want to be coached. They don't want that, hey, I'm a journey level worker, you're an apprentice, you do this, like kind of that hazing. I had to go through it, you did. That is not going to go over well. You're going to lose people. They want more of coaching. You're doing this well. This is what you can improve on. Do you need some coaching? That is a better way of management. I would have loved if my working career had kind of a coaching, supportive leadership style rather than barking down orders and this is what you do. So I think it's something good that they're forcing. If you want to keep your workforce of this age group, you're going to have to work with your higher level management. If they were brought up in kind of that directive, authoritarian style leadership, and that's their style, you might need to have some training and coaching for those supervisors to work with this generation. And honestly, it is better. I had to learn it. I grew up with more of an authoritarian, German military concept. If you're up here, you do as you're told if you're down here. And if you're up here, you just tell people what to do. This coaching way is the way to go. And I had to learn it. And it is a skill that can be taught. Yeah. And of course, they're not going to want a 3-ring binder. They want things online, text messaging, come on my phone, maybe social media, video learning. That's what they expect. And then there's Gen Z, who I love because both my kids are in this generation. They are 22 and 24. And I actually have so much confidence in this generation. I can't wait till they run the country and run all our businesses. I just like them. I think their values are really cool. They're very concerned about climate change, these 12 to 27-year-olds, and whatever's causing it, I'm not commenting on, but you're seeing the crazy 100-mile-an-hour winds and the fires in Los Angeles. And I grew up in Seattle, and our weather was a certain way for the first 45 years of my life. And then in the last 10 years, it just, weather just seems a lot different. We're having more extreme weather for whatever reason, and they're concerned about it. They had to live through the COVID-19 pandemic. That's going to affect these people coming in the workforce. They missed whatever developmental milestones. It hit when my son was a senior in high school. My daughter was a freshman in college. They missed like all this socialization and maturing, kind of just everything kind of stopped for Gen Z in these really critical years. So just be aware as they're coming in the workforce, the stress and anxiety of that and the missing maturation and skill sets and socialization that already wasn't great because of their smartphones. Just be aware of what they're coming in with. You might need to do some extra coaching and support to get them work ready. This generation believes in equality, all right, but it's beyond just, women and racial and disability. This generation, not all, but many, this gender identity, pronouns and all that is a bigger issue with this generation, which older generations may not ascribe to or understand, but it's just something to keep in mind. They grew up with a lot of gun violence, right? Just violence in schools. I'm not sure if it's happening more or just with the internet, we hear about every single thing that happens, but it feels like it's on the rise and it's something that they're concerned about. They're super globally connected. I mean, my son would be gaming with people from Japan and Russia and all over. Just they have a much more global perspective and get information from all around the world. This generation, I don't want to say they're not as optimistic, but they're not as concerned about, oh, what is personally developing. Like they care about money because of this wealth gap, how expensive housing is, how expensive food is versus what they make and the cost of student loans if they went to college. There's this wealth gap. Like, how am I ever even going to make it in the middle class? They're very concerned about their financial well-being. But what I love about Gen Z is they actually do care about life beyond themselves. I would say they're not as self-focused as Gen X and millennials. Um, they will volunteer more. They care about the greater world, greater community. So if your company has volunteer work or outreach, this is a great generation to bring in. And by the way, for technology, they know how to use artificial intelligence. They know how to use smartphones. I used to keep owner's manuals for everything. And my kids are like, Mom, just Google on YouTube how to change a toilet seat, how to fix the light in your oven. And there'll be some nerd there who will just walk you through the whole thing. And it's way faster and way easier to understand. So they are dragging me into the new technology. I'm going to get some tutoring on artificial intelligence here in the next couple of weeks. So lean on this generation for tech. They grew up with smartphones. That's how they get their information. And also I think safety training by video is so much better. I can understand fall protection, trenching, everything so much better by watching someone explain in a video what the rules are and doing it in real time as opposed to reading the WAC code and trying to make sense of what's this look like in real life. So use this generation. They're very fast, and I think they can really help with best practice learning. So for Gen Z, they're resourceful, pragmatic, connected, diverse. They expect flexibility. I know in construction, often that's not something that is as easily done, but especially with the pandemic, when a lot of companies, because they had to offer flexibility, they're just not as excited to coming back to rigidity. And if you want to keep good people and you can offer flexibility, well, then still being productive for your company, it's going to help you keep some really good people. I love Gen Z because they're really into authenticity. Like they're less about conformity, following some recipe card of what does a project manager look like? What's a plumber look like? They come as your full authentic self, whether that means I'm more conservative and Christian, or I have tattoos, or I like to be like this or that. Like come as you authentically are. I think that's really beautiful and something great that Gen Z brings to the table. They do want that stability, especially financially, and they're used to things being personalized for them because the internet personalizes everything. Your ads come up, your news feed comes up. When they were doing math class at school, the computer would see how they're doing and where they were struggling and give extra lessons to meet the areas where they're struggling. So they're used to things being personalized for them. So if you just have a one size fits all management style and processes, that's not going to go over as well with Gen Z. So yeah, they expect a lot of technology. If you don't have it, it's not going to sit well with them. Great people to get on any updating on technology you want to do. They're going to be super helpful and good at it. They like face-to-face meetings, surprisingly. Now, they like it. It's a little awkward. They're used to texting, and especially with COVID, they kind of missed a lot of face-to-face communication. But once you get them there, they really do value the relationships and communication and that authentic connection. So just as a brief review, right? Silent generation, telephone, likes face-to-face. Boomers had TV, they like talking. Gen X grew up with the PC, email, just tell me what to do. Gen Y grew up with the internet. They like things online and texting. And Gen Z grew up with the smartphones. They like video and face-to-face. And these are generalities. You got to check with yourself. Does this really fit for you? People you work with, be curious. Ask them, how do you want your work assigned? Do you want me to come talk to you about it or just send you an email? Like, people will tell you they're happy that you asked. And then you can meet them where they're at and they'll think you're an amazing boss or team member. So don't presume, just ask what people like. How can I best support you in doing well at your job? Now, all generations want to be respected. All generations like to have trustworthy leaders. There's no generations like, oh, I want shifty, underhanded, sneaky, keeping things, under wraps that don't need to be leaders. They like transparent, honest leadership. Everyone wants to feel valued. So that's pretty much those are human being conditions. Most people want the opportunity to grow, and most people want feedback, especially what they're doing right, as well as areas for improvement. So not everyone fits these. Again, be curious about who you are. Be thinking about your value, the lens that you look at the world through based on how you grew up, your parents, societal messaging, et cetera, et cetera. So be curious about yourself and then be curious about coworkers. And when in doubt, most people will tell you. So not with judgment, but just like that real sense of open curiosity, those curious conversations. So as a safety professional, what are some best practices? You got to understand, you got to take the time to know your people. It's not just the checklist. It's not just ordering the PPE. Really getting to know the people who do the technical work is an important part of leadership. I think I already went through these, so I want to be conscious of time and move on. This is a key takeaway. Maybe if you forget everything else. If you want to build relationships in business, that is done face to face, human being to human being. You sense their whole being, personality, intelligence, everything. They see you as a real live human being. You know, maybe a few things about their family, their interests. That's how you build a relationship. Okay. To problem solve, talking through, right? We've got a problem, we've got a challenge. In person, ideal, around a table or on the phone or maybe a Teams or Zoom meeting, talk. So that fluidity in real time, that you're mushing. What about this? What about that? That's ideal for problem solving. Email and text does not create relationship. Email and text is terrible for problem solving. That reply all email going round and round and round is very inefficient and makes people crazy. And I don't think you get the best results. Those email and text is to share information. You've already come up with your plan to solve the problem. And it's just data, like we're starting at 10 and when's the dump truck coming? Just kind of here's where we're at. So I think some people try to create relationship by email or text or problem solve. And I think, in my opinion, these are the best methods for those 3 different goals that you might have. Something to think about. For managers, try to always use respectful language and adjust for your audience, right? Who am I dealing with? What is to individualize for them. I used to think, well, I'm the boss, so they have to adapt to me. Then, why bother being the boss if everyone doesn't kowtow to my style? Very, very bad strategy. Just to let you know, I am a convert. If I'm going to be a good leader, it's my job to adjust to the people who work for me. And then rising tides raise all boats. So just to own up, I've had to learn a lot along these. So that's why I like teaching about it, because I had to learn all this stuff on my own. Manage your own emotions, be aware of your own biases, let other people speak. I've had to learn to count to 5 in meetings. Like, okay, does anyone have any other thoughts or questions? I'm telling you, that pause for me just feels like eternity. And that was probably only 3 seconds. But I've learned I have to allow the pause for people who are more thoughtful processors and need that space. So if you're like me, I think the long pause when you're asking for input, and I get beautiful input and questions and additional ideas when I invite and sit with the pause. It's hard for me. You know, what's the difference between a reaction and a response? I think it's at least 10 seconds, right? Reaction is immediate. You're not thinking through. It's emotional. It's coming from your lizard brain. And a response is something where you are checking in with both your brain and your emotions and your heart and give it a little time to be reflective. And you're thinking through, is this appropriate? Is this going to get me really where I want to go? So buying yourself time is huge. Very, very little has to be addressed immediately, right? Unless there's like blood or fire, most things, a little time to reflect, calm down, and think and feel it through first is going to get you a way better result. So for safety, I think you all know this. Don't talk to workers. Don't be the cop with the clipboard. Talk with them. Care about them. Coaching into compliance, loving them, having them love themselves and their families enough into following safety is your best practice. And the more you can know your employees and see them, the more they're going to feel cared about by you, and the more they're going to want to get on board with what you're trying to get them to do safety-wise. Yeah. I used to, when I grew up, treating everyone exactly the same is what's fair. And I am a convert that treating everyone exactly the same is not very fair because we're all so different. We got 8 billion people on the planet. We look at things, our lived experience, how we're hardwired is all different. No one's genetically the same. So the more you can individualize and meet people where they're at, to work with them and coach them up, or even when you're working for them, you're going to get better results. So individualizing, I think, is something to consider. So this is my contact information. It's maybe not the sexiest website in the world, but if you want to see some of the things that I'm doing, you can go to my website, sonorusllc.com. If you want to reach out to me, there's my email and my phone number. I do want to throw out, as I mentioned at the very beginning, I do quite a bit of training on mental health and suicide prevention that I have loved. And I want to do more in the addiction and recovery realm in the workplace, like what can be done up front with awareness and resources and education around addiction. And then what does a recovery supportive workplace look like? And so if anyone is, other than, here's an employee assistance program and, what the union contract might say about rehab, this is kind of at a deeper human level. If there's anyone working in that realm, I'd love for you to reach out with me, and I just would like to have a conversation about your thoughts and what you're doing. So with that, I hope I went about my amount of time. I'll stop sharing and then happy to answer any questions or be open for discussion.
Questions, comments? I see some coming into the chat room.